Hello, this is Mr. Fredericks. Today's lesson is on President William H. Taft in his times. And let's look at some of what President Taft got involved in his time. Now, um, back in the day in 1896, we had President McKinley. He got involved in the Spanish-American War. He got reelected in 1900. Pretty cool for him. Unfortunately, he got assassinated by an anarchist. Roosevelt took over and then got elected in his own right after that in 1904. Now, at that point, Roosevelt, one of our most popular presidents of all time, most progressive of presidents, served 7 long years as president. And you know what he decided? I'm done. Tired. I don't want to be president anymore. Now, this was in the years before the 22nd Amendment, so a president could actually serve as many terms as they want. After FDR did that, meaning 4 terms, the 22nd Amendment was passed to limit presidents. But Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt that is, was like, I'm done. I don't need an amendment to stop me. I just want to move on. Now, truthfully, he was a little tired, but really he just wanted to go off to Africa and hunt, which is exactly what he did for, I think, years after his presidency. Went to Africa, hunted, had a good old time. Most of what he hunted actually ended up in the Smithsonian. That said, come the 1908 election, he is not a part of it. Now, he is super popular, though, Mr. President. And he immediately tells the American people that Taft is my guy. Taft is in my cabinet. I trust him. He's excellent. You need to vote for him. So, with Roosevelt's recommendation, the American people instantly support Taft. They trust him. And in the 1908 election, he is going to represent the Republican Party. And Taft would do that. His opponent would be a Democrat, and by the name of William Jennings Bryan. Now, William Jennings Bryan is going to lose, and lose significantly. Taft is going to win quite a lot. Big election. Now, Taft does win, and William Jennings Bryan is a little sad because at this point, he's lost 3 elections representing the Democrats, twice against McKinley, and now against Taft. Apparently, he took 1 election off. It might just be a lesson to the Democrats that this guy is not electable. Now, that said, about to move on. So Taft takes office, and kind of the message of this political cartoon, if you look at it, is Roosevelt is beloved, but he's leaving behind his policies for Taft. Taft is kind of in a maid's outfit with the White House behind him. He is there just to make sure things are being done the way Teddy would have done them, just to take care of things while Teddy is gone. So people don't necessarily see President Taft in his own right, just kind of a surrogate for Roosevelt. So is he going to be a good or bad president? Well, let's take a look. So Taft's accomplishments. Accomplishment number 1, he did create the Department of Labor. Now, presidents can't be experts on everything. I don't care how intelligent they are. A country is super complicated. You have to run schools, the military, the environment, the criminal justice system. I mean, all these things need experts, and one person can't know it all. So with the country being that complicated, the president has a cabinet and has had a cabinet all the way back to George Washington. The president's cabinet, metaphorically speaking, is basically all of his advisors. And of course, the president has all these departments to basically run the country in all the ways we were just talking about. And each of these cabinet members is not only an advisor to the president, they run those departments. So there's Taft, and what he does is he adds an additional member of the cabinet. He recognizes that it's needed. And basically because of all that progressive pressure that was being provided by the muckrakers. But Taft embraces it, and the new Department of Labor is added. Now, why is that needed? Because workers were absolutely being exploited. Again, by exploited, I mean most of the wealth was wrapped up in the top 1%, and they were leaving nothing for their workers, and the workers were getting abused, and unions weren't playing a large role at this point. So they need protection. And by protection, I mean the working class, the workers, from greedy, very powerful business people, entrepreneurs. So the people are vulnerable, and the government needs to save these people, protect them. So again, laissez-faire, as far as Roosevelt began, is slowly dying, and the government is expected to play a role in protecting people from themselves, but also from the greedy, the rich, and entrepreneurs. So the Department of Labor will regulate, enforce, and pass laws to protect workers. Examples like this group. These working conditions clearly are not ideal, so perhaps we make a law against that. This would certainly not happen today. Discrimination. We have a long history of discrimination, particularly against women, African Americans, and so many other groups. And now the Department of Labor would investigate any claims of discrimination. Wages. Minimum wages were passed and enforced by the Department of Labor. And they're going to advocate that people get paid equitably under the 14th Amendment. So this new department, now we have a government, an executive level group within the government that's advocating and fighting for workers at all points. And if workers have trouble, they can go to this group and look for support. And that is a huge change in our society. So nice job, President Taft. That's a very positive thing. That's a huge accomplishment. Now, he might have been the one that made it official, but of course the progressive movement can take a lot of credit for that as well. Second major accomplishment of Taft. He basically signed an income tax. Now, before 1913, Constitution specifically forbid a income tax. There was a brief moment during the Civil War where one was implemented, but almost through our entire history, no income tax. It was banned by our Constitution. So the government could not get money through an income tax. Now, before 1913, the government got all of its money through tariffs, or most of its money. Basically, what the government would do is any products coming from other countries, the government would put an additional amount of tax on them. And that's where they would get their money, import duties or tariffs. Now, these high tariffs were really good for American businesses, domestic businesses, because it made foreign products more expensive. And if foreign products are more expensive, Americans are more likely to buy American products, and that helps American businesses. Foreign goods, of course, will be hurt by this, and so on. And these are examples like products that having lots of high tariffs, this helps domestic businesses because all of these products would be more expensive and Americans would no longer buy them or less apt to. However, tariffs, the unintended consequences, they are an extra tax. And what happens to those importers is they then raise their prices to make up for the tariffs. And now Americans that want to buy foreign goods, and there are so many foreign goods Americans want to buy, now have to pay more money. So this hurts consumers, particularly working Americans, because wealthy Americans can afford these tariffs and these higher prices. However, when you're a member of the working class or poor or middle class, these tariffs and these more expensive products are going to hurt you. They particularly add up. So in 1908, progressives, to get rid of high tariffs as the way that the government made income, had an idea. Another way that the government can get money besides high tariffs or having tariffs was to change the Constitution. And that's exactly what progressives pushed and what Taft endorsed. The 16th Amendment, the 16th change to the Constitution, made it possible for the government to collect money through an income tax people's jobs. Now, benefit number one is you can now have lower tariffs. The government has money from people's incomes, and now they can lower tariffs. That means consumer prices will go down on products, and that helps out people, particularly poor and middle-class people. Very helpful to American families. So progressives loved this. Taft loved it and got quite the credit for it. Now, benefit number two is now that the government is taking in so much money through an income tax, because it has a greater potential to generate revenue or money for the government, they can create programs that can be used to help people in need. And this is a really big concept for progressives, to help people in need, not to let the rich just dominate. Now, benefit number three, this income tax would allow the government to target who it's going to tax. And in the early days of the income tax, really the first 30 plus years, the only people that paid it were the wealthy. So the wealthy people paid an income tax. Now, that means it only affected the rich. So while tariffs would affect everybody and particularly hurt the poor and middle class, now the income tax is the new revenue stream for the government, and that only affects the rich. So, and that is a positive thing for the American people, particularly since there are so many less rich people than middle class people. So now that's going to change eventually after 1941, meaning World War II. During World War II, our government's going to be like, well, we can't just tax the rich anymore. We have to tax everyone. We actually need that much money to win World War II and then fund the Cold War. So a progressive income tax is what actually exists. And that's going to be implemented right around World War I, but particularly after World War II, where the rich people really get taxed. a lot, and the less than rich people get taxed at a lower rate. So, 16th Amendment made who happy? And that would be the American people, progressives, the poor, the middle class. Not happy, probably the wealthy, because of course they are the ones who are going to get soaked by the 16th Amendment, the income tax, and so on. So, again, kind of a thinking question. Is it okay when you have a progressive income tax to tax people that are wealthy at higher rates than poor people? Some people say that it's not fair to punish people for being super hardworking and successful. Other people would say that people are rich not because they're super hardworking or successful, but just because they had advantages in life. Some people would say if you're going to benefit in our society from our society at such a great level, you should pay back a proportional amount of taxes. So if you get a lot of greatness from life, you should be paying a greatness amount of taxes to pay for that. Some people say if you have more, you should pay more taxes to protect what you have. Um, Again, other people say no, this America should be about equality and equity, and that tax rate should be the exact same for everyone. Nobody should be punished for their success. Other people say the poor people just don't have enough money to be taxed. That if the amount of money that this country takes to run, we need to get lots of money to do that, and only the wealthy have that amount of money. So a progressive tax that taxes people at different rates, depending on how much money they make, is absolutely necessary. So you should have an opinion about the progressive income tax, the idea of having an income tax that's different depending on how much money you make. So either way, Taft created the Department of Labor to advocate and look out for the working class workers. He created the income tax, which protected consumers, and of course allowed the government to kind of take more money away from the wealthy to create programs to support the poor. He also was known as a trust buster. Now, monopolies are companies that take over entire industries. And of course, they are a threat to society because when you take over your whole industry, there's no competition. Competition, speaking in economic terms, is what drives prices down to fair levels and keeps quality of products up. So Taft is going to sue or take down or split up 80 monopolies during his presidency. Now, that's 3 times as many monopolies as Roosevelt in half the time. Roosevelt's known as the trust buster and the progressive president, whereas Taft actually did significantly more to break up monopolies. Now, that creates lower prices and higher quality products, but it also protects smaller businesses. So, I mean, that's a huge move for Taft. Less monopolies, again, means more competition, lower prices, and higher quality goods. Now, enough about Taft's accomplishments. Sounds like a good president. The progressives got super mad at him, and he lost their support. 2 reasons, but here's the first. Now, Taft did sign a tariff bill, and that tariff bill actually raised tariffs. Now, progressives love lower tariffs because it leads to lower prices, but Taft actually raised tariffs on a significant number of products. Now, this political cartoon here shows an example of that. Taft raised tariffs on foreign meat coming from other countries. Now, he did this in part to protect American meatpacking companies, because if foreign meat is more expensive, you'll buy American. So Taft thought he was doing something good. But in reality, that means foreign meat's so expensive that Americans couldn't afford it and now couldn't get it. It also meant if they wanted to get it, they had to use a lot more money, and they were angry at Taft for that. So tariffs are complicated. And by that, I mean, again, progressives want lower tariffs. Taft actually raised tariffs. Basically, you don't want to do anything with tariffs if you're a politician, because you cannot possibly win in that situation. You're either going to anger progressives or you're going to anger businesses. It's almost a no-win situation. So tariff reform, definitely not going to help out Taft. Progressives are going to be frustrated. Roosevelt is going to come back to the United States and be frustrated at Taft for doing this. So second reason progressives were mad, President Taft, well, we have to go back a few years. One of the greatest things that President Roosevelt ever did was he created the U.S. Forest Service. Him and Gifford Pinchot took a map of the U.S. and basically started circling the most beautiful areas and turned them into national parks, prevented businesses from doing anything with them, exploiting those lands for profit. So Gifford Pinchot's in charge of the U.S. Forest Service and protecting that land, particularly while Roosevelt's away. And Gifford Pinchot is a hero of Roosevelt and progressives and Republicans. Now, Roosevelt retires and William Taft takes over. However, at this point, we have this department within the government called the Department of the Interior. Now, the U.S. Forest Service, which Gifford Pinchot is in charge of, is underneath the Department of Interior that handles all the lands of the United States, not just the forests. So basically, Gifford Pinchot has a new boss, and that would be a guy named Richard Ballinger, who's the head of the Department of the Interior. Now, why is this important? Because Gifford Pinchot now has to report to Ballinger. I think I just said that twice, maybe. But Gifford Pinchot's boss, do they get along? The answer is no. In fact, it's not just going to be not getting along, it's going to be pretty hostile. Now, what happened? Richard Ballinger, when he took over the Department of the Interior, meaning he was in charge of all the lands, immediately issues permission to a business to lease 3 million acres of that land. The business is going to mine it and clear cut it and basically exploit it for profit, which is not the most uncommon thing in the world, but it was kind of sudden. Now, Gifford Pinchot looked at this deal and said, "You're destroying our resources, our environment. You're probably doing it for corrupt reasons. You probably took a bribe. Why are you letting this business do this to our land?" Gifford Pinchot's angry. He sees himself as the protector of beautiful land. So Ballinger and Pinchot go at it. They're fighting. They're arguing. It becomes a huge issue. Now Taft has to make a decision. Who's he going to support? Is he going to support the member of his cabinet, the head of the Department of the Interior, Richard Ballinger, or is he going to support the head of the U.S. Forest Service, Gifford Pinchot? He ends up having a tough decision, but ultimately he chooses the person who directly works for him, Richard Ballinger, the head of, again, the Department of Interior, one of his cabinet members. Gifford Pinchot is so frustrated and so upset that he then challenges publicly Taft. He says, "How could you? You've betrayed the progressives. You betrayed the environment. This guy is corrupt and you're supporting him. Maybe you're in on it too." And when you're president of the United States, you don't allow one of your many employees to publicly make you look bad. So Gifford Pinchot gets fired. Now, why is this the big deal? Because Gifford Pinchot is the hero. He's seen as the leader of the environmental movement, the only one that's standing between businesses and the environment surviving. All the conservationists and even the preservationists love Gifford Pinchot. So progressives see this as the beginning of the world falling apart. Ballinger and Taft destroying U.S. lands. So again, Gifford Pinchot a hero. Now, at this point, what is public perception? That Taft is protecting Ballinger and his corruption, and Taft is going after Pinchot. Now, if you look at this political cartoon, the most popular person in the country, certainly the most popular politician, Teddy Roosevelt, is now like, all right, time for me to come back into the public stage. Time for me to take down my former friend Taft. He's not taking out Pinchot. So at this point, the next election is coming up, the election of 1912, presidential election. And here's a picture of Taft and Roosevelt. Now, at this point, Taft is in charge of the Republicans. He's president after all. Lots of power. Roosevelt has been out of the game for 4 years. So in the Republican primary, where all the Republicans who want to be president, in this case two, fight it out to get the Republican nomination to go up against the Democrats, these two are going to battle. And who's going to end up winning? Is it the most popular person in the country, Roosevelt, or is it the president of the United States? And it turns out Taft is going to win the Republican primary. Now, how could he possibly defeat the most popular politician in the country, Roosevelt? It's because Taft right now is president. And when you're president, you're in charge of so many powerful people. And people owe you favors because you have power to support them. And all those people now are working for Taft, and they side with Taft. And he's the head of the Republican Party, so the Republican Party picks him. Now, only one candidate can run for president, so Teddy goes home and pouts. He's like, "How can I be the most popular president ever and not even have my party pick me for the election of 1912? Cries a little bit, I bet. So what does he do? He takes his ball and goes home. He says, "I'm no longer a Republican. I hate you guys." And he forms his own party called the Bull Moose Party, or should I say the Progressive Party is its official name, because he's the progressive leader. Now, here comes Teddy. Teddy is going to battle the Republicans and Democrats. We have a third party. All of our elections typically are like two parties. Now we have a third. Teddy is going to come in. Now, again, normally our elections are between Republicans and Democrats. Now, three candidates. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about was Teddy Roosevelt. Why was his party called the Bull Moose Party? Because he was campaigning and he did a speech in New York City, and somebody actually tried to assassinate him. Brought up their gun, shot him right in the chest. Teddy Roosevelt got shot. And lucky for him, he had his little notepad in his chest pocket. and the bullet barely got through it, still struck his body and made him bleed. But Teddy Roosevelt then finished the rest of his speech, and he was in so much pain, he was having trouble, and some of the audience started getting a little reckless, and Teddy was like, "Oh, please, I just got shot. Please be patient with me." And that story got out, and people are like, "Wow, Teddy Roosevelt is as strong as a bull moose." And then the Progressive Party got the nickname the Bull Moose Party. Now, so what's the problem with the situation? What's the problem with the Bull Moose Party? Well, the answer is that the Bull Moose Party is really just made up of Republicans that support Teddy Roosevelt. Now, the Republican Party kind of got split. Roosevelt left the Republican Party and said, "Everybody come with me," but not everybody did. So the Republican Party got split, but all those Republicans got split between two candidates. However, the Democratic Party was still all Democrats. So even though Teddy Roosevelt was the most popular candidate and Taft was the second most popular candidate, because they were splitting up the same amount of votes, the Republican Party, which overall was so much bigger and stronger than the Democratic Party, will get split. And when it gets split, now Teddy Roosevelt, with his huge amount of votes, is now less than the Democrats, and Taft, with his huge amount of votes, is less than the Democrats. Now, if they just combined back together, the Republicans would win. But now that they have two different parties, both are less popular than the Democrats. That's what's going to happen in the election of 1912. Basically, TR and Taft are going to be fishing from the same voters. And in the next election 1912, Democratic candidate Woodrow Wilson gets elected, even though he was the third most popular candidate, because we had two Republican parties, even though one of them had a name called the Bull Moose Party. Now, he's going to win. He's going to get the most amount of votes. So what ends up happening? Well, in that presidential election in 1912, Wilson crushes it, absolutely crushes it, and takes home 42% of the vote. But if you just combined Roosevelt's and Taft's amounts together, they were clearly more than Wilson. If they just didn't split their party, they, again, would have won. But the Electoral College reported out 435 votes for Wilson because he crushed those two because they were split. So, again, you can't split your party. You can't make your own third party, or that's bad news for both you and your former party. So, random facts about President Taft. He was the last president to have facial hair. Not a single president since has had facial hair. Kind of weird. He was the largest U.S. president, meaning he had the most weight on him, which led to this legend that he got stuck in a bathtub. Now, how did Taft get out of the bathtub? Supposedly it took 4 men to pull him out. Now, there is some truth to this famous story. It's kind of false that they had to use butter to dislodge him. That was always kind of said, but it's not true. Basically, he just, like most elderly people, they sometimes have trouble getting up in a wet surface, and he had trouble getting up. So it took some people to help him out of the bathtub. And it took a lot of them because he had some weight on him. So that's where the legend came from, that Taft got stuck in a bathtub. But in reality, it was a lot less dramatic than that. And since then, they actually had a bigger bathtub installed in the White House that is still there to this day so that it could fit Taft. Now, there are 3 branches of our federal government. And, one is the executive branch, one is the judicial branch, one is the legislative branch. We have never had someone in charge of both of them at different times. But after Taft left the executive branch as president, the head of the executive branch, he's then going to get appointed to the head of the Supreme Court. So he's going to run both of those branches, and we've never had anybody do that except Taft. So he was president and chief justice, kind of a big accomplishment. Now, in 1912, we have a new president by the name of Woodrow Wilson, who also is going to call himself a progressive president, although I think he'll prove to be a little less so than the other two, Roosevelt and Taft. And Roosevelt's going to be anything but progressive once World War I starts to kind of distract him. But that is for another presentation. Good luck, and look for your assignment in Google Classroom.